My name is Angie, and this is a story I wasn't supposed to find.
And I'm her sister, Cindy. We grew up hearing almost nothing about our great-grandmother. Just a name, Stella Smith. No photos, no grave, just a blank space in the family story.
We knew a little about her, like she was married in Springfield, Illinois in 1925. She had 2 daughters that she gave up for adoption through the Illinois Home and Aid Society. And then absolutely nothing. Nothing before 1925 and nothing after giving up her children in 1930.
We had no idea what happened to her, where she went, or even if she was alive for long after that. She was just missing, and she stayed missing for over 90 years until a DNA test cracked the case wide open.
This is Buried Threads, a podcast about family secrets, silence, reinvention, and what happens when lost stories begin to resurface.
Before we get to the twist, we have to start with Marie Christine, who is our grandmother.
Marie Christine grew up in rural central Illinois. We always knew her as Norma Jean because she was adopted very young.
Now, for the purposes of this podcast, we will refer to her only as Marie Christine. Otherwise, it might get too confusing to follow.
We know that Marie Christine had a close bond with her adopted father, Noah. We have a great picture of her standing with him. She looks like a happy little girl. But he passed away when she was 9 years old, and she expressed this as a very difficult loss for her.
Yeah. She was then raised by her adopted mother, Nellie, and her adopted grandmother, Nanny. And by the standards of the day, the little family was stable and pretty comfortable.
After Noah passed, they sold their farm and they bought a house in town in Macomb, Illinois. We know that they were pillars in the local Methodist church. The family were founding members of the church there.
And we can fill in more of her story later, but we know that as an adult, Marie Christine seemed to have a longing to know who she was, where she came from. She knew where her adoption took place, the name of the agency, and she had the name of her birth mother, Stella Smith.
At one point, she hired a private investigator, presumably to find her mother or some information about her birth parents. It seems the PI was able to discover that Stella Smith married Christopher DeBoard in Springfield, Illinois in 1925. They later divorced. He found nothing for Stella Smith before then and nothing after 1932, where she was working at an estate and living there as well. But that was it. The name Stella Smith went nowhere. It was like searching for a shadow.
And we didn't even know Marie Christine had searched for her birth family until after she passed away. I'm not really sure when she started her search, but you began in the early 2000s. And with all the tools available online at that time, you really thought you could find more than Grandma would have been able to when she did her search.
Yes, and I did. Now, this was in the early days of Ancestry, so it didn't have anywhere near the tools that it has now, but I was able to scroll through digitized copies of the census and find some basic information. And in that process, I was able to connect with the family of Stella's husband, Christopher DeBoard. Christopher Columbus DeBoard. They didn't have a lot of information about him. He was kind of an enigma in their own family. They didn't even know about Stella or about their children. But in the divorce summary, we learned that Marie Christine had a sister, Florence, and she was named in the divorce. But we didn't know anything about what happened to her. We always thought that after Stella and Christopher got divorced, each one took a daughter with them, Florence with Christopher and Marie Christine with Stella, who was eventually then put up for adoption. Interestingly, Christopher's family had a picture of him with a young, dark-haired girl who was a mystery to them. The family lore is that he was running around with a gypsy, their words, not ours. They sent the picture over to me, and I was shocked to see a young girl who looked a lot like the pictures of Marie Christine as a child. We're pretty sure the young girl in the picture with Christopher was Florence.
So you found Stella's husband, Christopher Columbus DeBoard, that's quite the name, by the way, and you put the family lore about Christopher and a young gypsy to rest. I'd say you did pretty well in the early days of your searching.
Well, there would definitely be other family stories about Christopher to put to rest. More about that later. But I could not find any information about Stella Smith. I didn't have a birth date and no real anchor points of information. And we didn't know what happened to Florence. I kept searching, just finding a little something here or there.
And after many years of searching and many fruitless leads, we decided to try something different. And that's when everything changed in this search. So we got together and we bought Mom a DNA kit for her birthday.
And then we had to convince her to take it.
Right. So let's talk about why we thought a DNA test would help. Why was that the next best step in our search?
Well, about that time, it was becoming pretty popular for people to do a DNA test to learn about their genetic makeup or to help with genealogical research. You purchase a kit, you take a cheek swab, and you send it off to be analyzed. After a few weeks, you receive a report of your genetic makeup, revealing where some of your ancestors are from.
Right. And at the same time, genealogical databases were making it possible for people to take their DNA results and use it to search the sites for genetic matches, correct? So matches could be anything from close relatives to very far removed, as long as you share DNA. And we're going to have to talk more about this process sometime and the difference that it's making for people who are searching to know where they come from, the way that Marie Christine was searching. Just she was searching before this kind of tool was available. So tell us about getting Mom's results and then what you did with that information quickly.
I'm not really sure what I expected I was going to receive in the results. Maybe I thought it would be like a neon sign that says, here they are, here's who you're related to. But it wasn't like that at all. What was surprising and what did show up is that she had a 24% Spanish ethnicity. Right. And this did not match anything that we knew about her family. And so we very quickly realized that this had to be related to this Stella Smith, which was a huge surprise to us. There's so much that we learned from the DNA, and we're going to get to a lot more of that later. But I did take her information and I put it on a genealogical website.
So once you did that, did it just start connecting you with DNA matches?
About 52,000.
That's an insane number, by the way. Obviously, you can't just look through those one by one. It would take a lifetime. So how do you sift through that much information?
Well, I was learning as I went. Learning on the fly. I started by searching with those relatives that were the closest. I had the largest number of centimorgans that would give us the closest information. And I had my eye out for anything Spanish related because I felt like that was going to be the key to unlocking what was going on. And then there are some tools in Ancestry that you can use to build clusters. And so you kind of figure out who's related to each other in all your DNA matches, and especially in those closer ones. And so I began to build clusters and then figure out who are the known people that we know they connect to, and then who are the unknowns, which come back to the mystery that we were trying to figure out.
So then you found Paul. And Paul was a close match. And so when you looked at his tree, you needed to figure out how we were connected with Paul.
His tree didn't give me any information that looked familiar in any way, so I really had no idea. But the match was close enough. It was like first cousin range. And so first cousin or first cousin once removed. And so I was very interested to figure out how he connected. He also had the Spanish ethnicity. And so that was another piece that, I was pretty sure he was in the cluster of people that we were looking for. And so I just sent him an email and very casually said, we have this close match, trying to figure out how we're connected. He wrote back and said, yes, he'd like to figure out how we're connected as well. I said, there's a woman, Stella, married to a man, Christopher. They had 2 children. They lived in Springfield, and really didn't say much more than that. And he very quietly said, well, there's a Stella in my family tree who disappeared a long time ago, and we never heard anything else from her.
So just to go back for a second, you actually kind of learned the hard way when reaching out to people via whatever website that you couldn't just say, hey, my grandmother was adopted, DNA match, and then expect people to respond, because a lot of them would not respond.
They would run away scared.
Yeah, but Paul responded to you pretty quickly. And then you guys found you might have a connection. Did he seem skeptical, or how did he react?
I wouldn't say skeptical, but he was definitely in awe and kind of in shock. And he explained that the Stella in his story was his grandmother, and that his grandmother was married to a man named Emilio, and that they had a baby, Mary Rose, which was his mother, and that before Mary Rose turned 1, that she had disappeared from the family, disappeared from town, and they never heard from her again. Literally never heard anything until I reached out with this DNA match 96 years later.
Yeah. So while very sad, there is an interesting connection to Estrella leaving a child behind, and who we knew as Stella leaving 2 children behind and then disappearing without a trace.
Yeah. So again, Paul is the grandson of Estrella through her first daughter that she left behind. And my mom is the granddaughter of Estrella through the 3rd daughter she left behind.
Mm-hmm. So Estrella, and the last name would have been Suarez. So Estrella Suarez is the same person as Stella Smith. That's the conclusion you guys came to.
We figured out that our Stellas were the same.
Yeah, Stellas are the same. And for the purposes of this podcast, we are going to refer to Estrella Suarez mostly, because it might get confusing, but just to understand, she also is Stella Smith. And just a little spoiler alert, there will be other names that come into play. But Estrella and Stella, whichever name we use, it is the same person.
So once we came to the conclusion that his Stella and my Stella were the same, now we were looking not only into the mystery of what happened to her after Marie Christine was given up for adoption, but now we have this other mystery of how she came to be part of this family. She had immigrated here from Spain. How did she get here? There were some,
and they don't know that either.
They don't know that either. Yeah. There were some unusual things about that story. And how did she end up being part of the family that she was in? And why did she leave her first family? There were a lot more questions than answers.
Yeah. And there are probably a lot of questions that we'll never find answers to, like why she left her children or why she started over more than once. We're going to continue to try to uncover Estrella's story without judging her. That's something that we have been trying to do, to find out the story, but not judge her or anyone else for choices that we really can't understand, especially not knowing them and not hearing directly from them. We're making a lot of guesses. So we'll just seek to know her story, which is also a part of our story.
And as we explore, we're going to get into the records we found, the DNA trail, the daughters she left behind. But we wanted to start here with the moment that we knew the story we grew up with wasn't the whole story, not even close.
So this season on Buried Threads, we'll follow the path of Estrella Suarez and the lives she touched, fractured, and unknowingly reconnected.
Next time, we'll dive into the story of Estrella Suarez and what we know about her life as Stella Smith, and the story that was almost buried with her.
Thanks for listening. If you're walking your own search through DNA research, silence, or your family story, you're not alone.
If you want to learn more about our story, you can read it chapter by chapter on Substack at a blog called Buried Threads. We'd love it if you subscribed or left a review. It helps other listeners to find us. And if you've uncovered something through DNA that changed your understanding of your family, we would love to hear about it. Message us on Substack or find us on Instagram at Buried Threads.
Watch for our next episode to post right here. We'll also be dropping some documents and photos with each podcast. Let us know your questions and your comments as we go.
Until next week, keep pulling the thread.